This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be a substitute for mental health services.
Discussions in this show should not be construed as specific recommendations or investment advice. Always consult with your investment professional before making important investment decisions. Securities offered through registered representatives of Cambridge Investment Research Inc., a broker-dealer, member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services through Cambridge Investment Research Advisors Inc., a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and Financial Wellness are not affiliated.
Welcome to Financial Wellness. I'm Stephanie, along with my childhood friend Chad. This is the place where we unravel the intricate connections between financial well-being and mental health. In each episode, we explore the complexities of personal finance and how our monetary choices impact our emotional and mental states.
Here is where we also discuss and learn how to get better at everything from budgeting to investments to insurance. We share personal stories, expert insights, and practical tips to help you navigate those connections between your financial stability and mental wellness. Make sure to show some love by liking and following us. It really helps a lot. So let's get started. Did you want to go first?
Our mental well-being is directly linked with our financial well-being.
It helps you to avoid wasting money.
We can bring some normalizing and even some humor to these situations. You know, we're both from New Orleans. We like to bring a little fun to the table.
Yeah. It becomes empowering and it becomes something that you control versus something that controls you.
Hi, Chad.
What's up, Steph? How you doing?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. So what's been going on with you this week?
Well, I have some very big news.
Ooh, do tell.
That has greatly impacted my finances. So I have accepted a position in New Orleans, Metairie, actually, which is a suburb, where I will be running an IOP program. That stands for Intensive Outpatient Program, which is different from the residential treatment facility that I've been working in recently, in that it's not a 24/7 job. But I'm really excited to be moving home, but it happened really quickly. So financially, I'm trying to figure out what to do with my house and renting and selling, and
Right.
like my stomach's hurting just talking about it. Like
Well,
it hurts in a good way, like excitement good and nervous, and yeah.
well, congratulations. It's a touch stressful. It sounds like just a little bit.
Yeah, you hear the fast talking.
Well, what's interesting, as you were saying that, it completely reminded me of when we moved into our house. And
Yes.
and because I'm not sure if I ever told you this story, but the year we sold our house and moved to a new house 5 years ago, right before we got married, my wife and I got married. We sold our house about a week before our wedding. So sold the house, moved out, still hadn't really found a house to buy, but wanted
Right.
to be in a good school district and all that. So we were really kind of running around like crazy people. We found a house, decided to just rent that house for a year, and then I basically moved all the stuff into the new house. We hopped on a plane, flew to New Orleans for the wedding. It was
I
like
mean,
it
how
was
many stressful life events
it
can you fit
was
into
yeah,
1 week?
it was
Or exciting life events?
yeah, it was like how not to plan a wedding, right? But then, as it turns out, after renting the house for a year, like the market kind of went nuts, and we're like, oh, okay, well, we'll just stay here another year. So stay there another year. And then the year came up, and we're like, well, we're not sure if we're gonna stay in New Mexico or if we're gonna move. So we stayed another year. And we did that cycle for 2 or 3 years. So next thing you know, we've been in this house for 5 years. So we are actually planning to move out of state. And during that process now, kind of like you, we are in the process of also looking for a new house and finally, going back to buying a house and, working with mortgage companies and realtors and starting to enter into back into that world again. So it's been also pretty exciting, very nerve-wracking and
Right?
stressful, but exciting. So we'll see how this next chapter unfolds.
Well, I mean, how ironic, Chad, that you and I are both about to enter into one of the biggest debts of our lifetime. Buying a house is a big debt.
Yeah. Well, and it's
And
also a reminder that we've been living parallel lives for the last 40 years. But go ahead.
that's so true. Well, and I also, as a guest at your wedding, had no idea that you had just been through all of that stress.
Oh, we were still going through it. We're still going through it like every day, like still going through it as that wedding week was going on, just getting, things cleared up.
Walking down the aisle going, okay, we're good.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Are we gonna go? We're gonna go back home and we're gonna unpack.
Well, just as an aside, it was an amazing wedding.
Oh, it was. It really was. It was so much fun.
Oh, such
We
a
need to have
ball.
a wedding reunion at some point. So in
I'm
New Orleans, we need to do that in New Orleans at some point.
I'm so in.
All right, well,
I'm
let's do it.
so in.
But after this next move, and we're both settled in,
Correct.
and we've been able to kind of take a deep breath, come down, and and be settled in, and then we can start thinking about some of the other fun things that we want to do.
The other celebrations sounds a little bit like some of that financial planning you've been teaching me about.
Well, well, speaking of being taught, I want to learn from you today. I want you to tell me about stress.
Hmm.
We're talking about it. We're both kind of going through it a little bit. How does it manifest? What is it about? What does it do to us mentally, as well as, I guess, physically, right? Does it have physical impacts? Let's talk about stress
Absolutely.
today.
Sure, let's talk about stress. I mean, I think pretty much anyone listening can relate to or understand stress. They've experienced stress, you experience it at varying levels day to day. And one of the things, and I think I've talked about this before, the body's stress response is an important part of our survival. It is regulated by a part of our brain that isn't necessarily checking the facts, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So our body senses danger and our body is not checking, our brain is not checking, specifically the amygdala is not checking to see if that stress is a lion chasing after us or if it's a deadline, or for teenagers if it's a test, or even adults take tests too, or if it's someone who's angry, or all of the different things that cause us stress, or if it's a big move that
Right.
we don't have the information for. So our body will trigger the stress response. And typically, the extremes of the stress response are, and this is regulated by the autonomic nervous system, or our autonomic nervous system is activated, and it can either be accelerated, it could be like the accelerator, and that's going to be fight or flight, or it can be more like a break, and that would be freeze. So fight or flight is actually one of the responses, and freeze is the other. So your body is preparing to fight or run. So you might feel tingling because your body doesn't use oxygen in the same way. It's reserving its oxygen so you can run. You might be short of breath. Your lungs are kind of changing the way that they're operating. You're taking shallower breaths. And then freeze, things slow down and your protective response is hiding. So that is those are the adaptive modes that we go into. But you can imagine if you're totally activated in fight or flight mode all the time, then you're going to be probably highly agitated. You're going to be fidgety. Your eyes will be darting around. It's going to be really difficult to make decisions. Your thoughts are racing. And then on the flip side, if your predominant response is freeze, you're going to have a difficult time getting the words out. Your voice might shake. You can think about that like a lot of people when they have that fear of public speaking, they
Hmm.
just freeze. So the body stress response is completely adaptive for us thousands of years ago when we didn't have consistent shelter, things like that.
So is that like an either or kind of thing, or can people experience both?
Most people experience both, but they also have one that is a like a primary. So if you and your wife were in a terrible car accident, God forbid, and your primary was fight or flight and her primary was freeze, then those different stress responses would be activated
So I
in
would
that.
have to rescue everybody, essentially, is what you're saying.
Yes. I'm sorry. I should have said Melita's fight or flight
Okay.
and you're freeze. Because I really picture your wife rescuing everyone. Not that I don't picture you doing that, but we do have a primary. And so, and you'll probably like when I say that to you, do you know what your primary is?
I don't, and as you're talking, and the reason I ask, if people experience both, I know when I have deadlines or if I have a number of to-do items on my list, and I will sometimes just stare at them
Yes.
and I just sort of freeze up, like you're saying. I'll just
Mhm.
stare, and then I will feel sometimes like it is difficult for me to click on a file on my computer, which is the
Yes.
simplest thing in the world to do, is to search for a folder on my computer. And it builds up in my head like this thing that is nearly impossible to do. And I'll
Yeah.
experience that regularly, right? Especially when I have like a big to-do list, and especially if it's tasks that I don't necessarily want to do, but I know they need to get done. But the accelerator part that you mentioned as you were talking, it reminded me of my senior year in college. And
Okay.
I remember going into finals, and I remember having like, I think I had like three exams I had to take, and I had like two or three papers that I needed to write, all within a span of like a week. So I had to do all of this.
Wow.
And part of this was because I procrastinated and waited to the last week, which is part of my problem also. But I remember going into that last week and just feeling completely overwhelmed and having like this massive pity party. Like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? Da, da, da. And that lasted for about 10 minutes. And I distinctly remember, and I've told the story before, I distinctly remember saying, well, I don't have a choice. I got to do it. And
Right.
then at some point, I don't know when it is, I don't remember doing the papers. I just remember putting my head down and just getting it all done. And
Yes.
it was almost like that feeling like when you're in a zone, like in sports, you're not really conscious, or you're not really thinking, you're just kind of in a zone. Like I got
Okay.
to that point where I had to get it done.
And you did
So,
it.
and I did it. I didn't do all that well on the
You know that
exam,
you completed the
but
task.
I graduated. So that
Well, you know, what you were saying brings up the other side of things. I think we often talk about stress as a negative feeling or a negative thing in our lives. And it is also a pretty good motivator as well.
huge.
I mean, if I don't have a deadline, it's really hard for me to get things done. That's why I set goals for myself because I know I need that measuring stick. I need to know when this needs to be done by because I'm a freeze person. I it's harder for me to get started or, you know, the procrastination happens and so I'm a freeze person. So I know that I need to have the deadlines set for me so that I will feel enough stress to get it done,
Mhm.
not too much stress that I shut down.
Right. Well,
So
and
it's about finding that balance.
yeah, and as you're saying that, I wish that I was a person who didn't need to feel like my back was against the wall
Right,
to get things done and perform. But because like you, like when I'm up against a deadline, when time is short, not only do I get things done, but I get them done and I'm hyper focused. And
right,
prior to that, when I have time to get things done, I'm not as focused. I'm putting it off. I have other things I need to get done. But when the deadline's there, not only am I getting it done, but I feel like it's getting done well.
right,
And I would like to be able to get myself to a point mentally where I'm doing that with a week to spare
right,
or
right.
or a few days to spare. So, how do or are there ways that people can kind of change what their natural responses are?
When you were talking about that, I was thinking of the setting your clocks at we can't do it now with our phones being connected to satellites, but setting all the clocks in your house 5 minutes
My wife
uh
does that. Melita does
fast
that.
so that we're on time.
Melita does that. It drives me nuts. I'm like, we know what time it is. What are we doing?
But we know, right? We know we've set it five
Yeah.
minutes ahead, so we know to subtract those 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I think setting your own personal goals for yourself where you're challenging yourself rather than doing it for some outside person.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of deadlines at work, a lot of deadlines for school, those are deadlines that other people set, and those they're not movable.
Mm-hmm.
But we can create our own set of deadlines or our own patterns, our own schedules, and find that internal motivation to where we say, okay, I'm accountable to me for this. And I think that's one of the key shifts in mindset where I'm going to do this for someone else and I'm going to stress myself out about it and get it done because it's someone else is waiting on it. But what I really want to do is set that goal for myself so that I am internally motivated to get that done just as much as I would be if I were turning it into someone else. And so sometimes what I'll do, or what I've had other people do, is have a buddy system where you let someone know what your goals are. So when you have the buddy system, you're still using a little bit of that external motivation, but you're setting the goals for yourself and communicating them to another person rather than being someone who has to get this done to give to a boss, and then your work is impacted by it. I'm not sure if I said that last thing really eloquently,
Well,
but
no, I think you said it perfectly. And it reminds me of the conversation we were having when we were talking about planning and particularly budgeting, where we were talking about these accountability groups and how folks will work together to share their progress in their plans and just having that other person to talk to, in a sense, report to. I think that's great. I'm listening to you today the next time I have to give a presentation because I'm particularly bad and I do a good amount of public speaking and most times that I do something and I speak publicly, I pretty much do a couple practice sessions either the day of or the day before versus being fully prepared a week in advance. And so my goal the next time I have something to do like that is to be prepared a week in advance, and I'm going to make sure that you're my accountability buddy,
okay.
and then we'll discuss it and see how it went.
Well,
So,
but I want to give you some props too, though, because a lot of people do not practice. They just do it and they really do feel unprepared.
right,
Now, there is something to be said for the fact that you're doing it often. And when I was a professor, I was public speaking, 3 nights a week.
right.
So, and I was talking on the same topics that I was giving presentations on, but I kind of stopped practicing. And there were times when that was fine, and there were times when it wasn't so great. So you're practicing, whether it's the day of or not, you're still doing it. So you still are prepping.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I've noticed that even that last minute prep, it could have been better.
Right.
And being able to do it or doing it sooner and practicing sooner and more frequently, I would like to get to the point where those public speaking engagements I feel are flow better because
Right.
I'm as prepared as I could be versus just getting down the basics and then still feeling like I'm winging it, even when, one or two practice sessions beforehand, it still feels like I'm winging it, even though I know the topic. So again, you're going to be my
Okay.
new accountability buddy next time one of these presentations
Awesome.
comes
I'm
up.
happy to do that.
So
And
so with
I'm gonna be really firm with you about that. No, I'm just kidding.
perfect. And then we'll come back on here and we'll talk about it. And we'll
We
talk
will.
about how it went.
That
So
sounds
so
perfect.
so let's talk a little bit about some financial issues that may trigger these feelings of stress or feelings of anxiety. I know we've talked a little bit
Ooh.
about. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was making a whoo sound because there are a lot of them.
Oh, well, I was going to talk about debt.
Yes.
What other ones are you thinking about?
Well, there were a lot of emotional responses to debt, is what I
Ooh,
was thinking about. And
okay.
I was thinking about the fact that debt can bring about a great deal of stress and anxiety in people's lives. So that was where my brain was going.
hmm we'll talk a little bit about that. I mean, I know that, part of the reason that we started doing this podcast was to talk about not only the impacts of financial issues and how they impact us emotionally, but also the impact of emotional issues and how they impact us financially. And
Right.
that is the use of the word impact in a lot of sentences. I probably should have found a different word.
Uh,
However, what have you found, or some of the reactions when it comes to debt and how it impacts us?
One of the things I've been thinking about a great deal since we've talked about tackling this topic is that debt is pervasive in our lives. There are very few people who are completely debt free, whether it's a mortgage or a car payment or credit cards. You can talk about all the different kinds of debt, but it's quite pervasive in our society that you have some sort of debt. Student loans, I can't believe I forgot that one. And so it's something that's always there, and it's something that comes up monthly for the most part as a need that needs to be paid. It also impacts our basic needs, being, food, shelter, water, those sorts of things.
Mm.
So we're carrying debt and paying our debt on these things that are absolutely essential to our survival. And so it can deeply, deeply impact our ability to function in the world if we're carrying around a great deal of stress, anxiety, depression, trauma responses, those sorts of things. So we can have these really negative impacts related to our financial situations. And then our financial situations can be greatly impacted by our mental health. So, someone who is experiencing the level of anxiety that reaches the clinical level, where they may not be able to be around people as much or have a hard time getting in a car and driving, phobias, things like that, or depression symptoms where someone has a hard time staying awake, they sleep a lot. These are going to impact your work life and whether you're showing up to work or whether you're able to work. So they're going to have that other negative impact on your finances. So I see it as kind of a cycle
Which
that feeds.
which which if you're struggling to go to work and
Right,
you have debt, then that will impact your ability to pay those debts, which then again, with interest on those debts, increases how much you owe, which presumably would add to the stress, which have a sort of a recycling of those impacts. It's almost like the snowball effect, right? It just gets bigger and bigger. As the debt gets bigger, the stress gets bigger.
right.
can feel like there's no way out.
it can be absolutely devastating. So they have that reciprocal impact on each other. And yes, I see it as like a spiral, like sucking you in,
Yeah.
sucking
Yeah.
you down.
Yeah.
That's not really it. Probably
Well,
maybe
it can
shouldn't
feel
use
like
that.
that because I mean, and again, when you have from a financial standpoint, when you have large debts like that, it takes away your ability from other purchases. It takes away from your ability to save more. It takes, either saving money in an emergency fund or a savings account or saving money into a retirement fund. That's money that could be used for other things. And like you said, it's that monthly reminder of a decision that was made previously. And yeah, is this confession time?
Yes,
Do we
I
do
where's
confession
my
time?
confession bell?
I
Ding
know
ding ding.
we need the confession bell, but I'm paying a pretty significant debt that I've sort of built up over the years, that I took on and have just not been able to get ahead of it. Right, it's a large tax bill. I make the payment every month and working to pay it down faster, and I can look back in the history of it and understand how I got there, right? Because at the time I had to make some decisions about being divorced and having building a new home and where I was going to allocate money and having to basically build a house from scratch and using the resources to buy furniture and silverware and beds and all those things that you need to make a home. And just sort of fell behind on something that I'm now paying. And it's one of those reminders, but it's also one of those things that I can pay it. It's a debt I can handle. I can actually start to even, take steps to pay it down even faster. But it's also one of those things that takes away from, other opportunities that are out there, right? So living with that can be very stressful. One of those
Sure.
things that can be done, but it'll be nice to be out of that. And it's
Yeah.
when you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, it's like, okay, what are all the things that I can, really start doing and having this freedom? And, when you have debt, you're not really fully free. What I've seen over the years with a lot of my clients is my happiest clients and I should say my happiest clients and my most successful clients are the
Mhm.
ones that have little or no debt. And it doesn't matter how, and I may have said this before, it doesn't matter the clients making, hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars a year to the clients who are making, 30, $40,000 a year. The ones with the least amount of debt have been the most successful because they're able to set money aside for savings and for retirement plans and all these other things. They're able to do that and have freedom. And
Yes.
yeah, no, totally get it.
I mean, and even like thinking about the way that we're even talking about it is you're talking about freeing up funds, but you're also just saying like freedom in
Hmm.
general, because the more funds we have free, hmm, is the more we can do. That really strikes me as a huge piece of this puzzle. I'm having an aha moment. I haven't quite fully processed it, but financial freedom is really a lot of it to me is about living debt free. I'm not there. I mean, I'm in my 50s and I still have student loan debt. So, because I went and got my PhD when I was in my 30s. So,
Well, trust me, I have several clients in their 50s with student loan debt. And so yeah, no, it's one of the, it's certainly one of those things that can add to the worry, the anxiety. Financial freedom, like you said, really is having the ability to do the things that you want to do and knowing that if you do those things, it won't put you in a negative financial situation or set you back for whatever your goals are, whatever your plans are. Just having that flexibility to do the things that are important to you. We all have different definitions of what that looks like, and we all have different definitions of success. So financial freedom is going to mean something totally different to different people, but debt is a universal thing that can hamper a person's anyone's full freedom, you know.
I
I mean,
well, so do you have like a basic definition of debt? Like what are you financial people? How do you describe it?
it's what you owe. Seriously, when I talk
It
to
is.
when I
It
when I
is.
talk to clients about net worth, it's what you own minus what you owe. That's it.
Right.
We don't take into account like your day-to-day expenses, like your utility bills and your groceries and all that. I mean, so it's really the simply put, it's what you owe.
Okay, I'm
And
having a moment. Will you will
ooh,
you
we
will
need to
you
we need to ring the bell again.
I know. Well, this is not a confession, but it is a moment. So we were just talking about deadlines being causing stress.
Hmm.
And deadlines are also very much like due dates. Bill due dates can cause stress, but we're paying someone else. Savings, okay, I'm having financial epiphany here. Savings is paying ourselves or investments or whatever, wherever
Hmm.
we put our money to basically buy that freedom for ourselves.
We're trying to flesh out how debt impacts us emotionally and physically. I'd like to talk more about when you're feeling stress and you have a debt that's due, or you have really the debt is one thing, but what you're saying is the stress can impact a whole range of activities, and debt just happens to be one of those things, right? If you have due dates and other things that have to get done, your stress responses can impact how you address those.
Correct.
Well, I shouldn't say accept that, but specifically talking about debt, when we ignore them, it only gets worse, right? And can have a devastating impact, right? You could have, if you owe money on your credit cards and you skip the payment, then that bill just gets bigger. Your credit score gets worse. You could eventually lose the credit card, and that hampers your ability to have credit for larger purchases like a home or a vehicle. You don't pay your mortgage. You go long enough without paying your mortgage, you could potentially lose your home. You could potentially lose your vehicle. So all of these, which again, once you're under those threats of loss, that just adds to the stress.
Right. Because
So
how do you get to work if you can't drive there?
yeah,
If you're living in a place where public transportation isn't an option, like I drive 45 minutes to my job.
yeah.
There isn't public transportation that takes me there.
How long did you say? 45 minutes?
Yes.
Ooh.
I drive to Hammond, yes.
Oh, wow. It's funny living in New Mexico, everything is like 10 or 15 minutes away. And then on top of that, I work from home. So,
It's
but I
nice.
also, but that will be my life soon enough. That that
Right.
that 45 minute to hour and a half commute will be my life soon enough.
That's
Uh,
not typical for here. Most people don't drive that far, but
yeah. Let's talk a little
so
bit about ways to manage debt.
mhm,
And one being, making sure that we pay our bills on time. If you have a credit card, making sure that you're making those payments on the due date, even if you're able to just make the minimum payment, at least make your payment on or by the due date. Ideally, if you're able to pay extra, pay extra. In some cases, if you're able to set up your payment on an automated monthly draw, so you don't have to forget, that also sounds, a little epiphany, but that sounds like that would be particularly helpful for people who have challenges managing stress or managing anxiety, just to set it on an auto payment so that you don't have to remember to do it every month.
right. Provided you know the funds are there.
Provided assuming you have the funds there, right? Yeah. But still just making sure that's one less thing you have to worry about, is remembering to pull the trigger to or click the button to make that payment. But like I said, if you can make more than the minimum payment. I've found folks who, when they have opportunities, sometimes they will take on more debt than they actually need. So that can be good and bad. I if for folks who struggle or worry about whether or not they should take on additional debt or take on an additional credit card because they can, I would caution that that also can be a good or bad thing because your credit report, your credit score, part of that credit score is impacted by the amount of debt you owe versus what's been you've been allowed to have, right? Your credit limit. And
Mhm.
generally speaking, if you're as long as your actual debt is below 30% of your limit, you're in good shape. So taking on an additional credit card would increase your credit limit, assuming you're just using a little tiny bit of it can be a really good thing.
Right. And when you
However,
say credit limit, you're really only talking about credit cards, not talking about the debt that you're carrying for a house or something like that.
right, yeah. I mean, that can impact, the additional debt you have can impact your debt to income ratio, but your credit usage typically is relating to your credit cards, your store cards, your
Mhm.
dealer's cards, your Visa, your MasterCard, all those. And so I would recommend people look at all your credit cards, look at what all your limits are. If you have limits on, on your credit cards, look at all your limits and then look at each card and make sure that you're only using 30% of what that card offers. Or at best, if you're able to pay it off at the end of the month, that would be ideal. Just managing those payments and taking an active role in managing those payments can actually help a lot to limiting not just the stress, but also the financial impact of debt. So, debt can be used in a good way, but it can also be traumatic in its impact if not used well. And we've all
Yeah.
kind of, and in some cases, again, these aren't always things that are taught. So in a lot of cases, we learn these things by trial and error if they're not taught.
Right.
I remember in confession time, I remember in my early adulthood, didn't really think too much about credit
Well, yeah,
until
neither did I. I get that.
yeah, until it was really kind of taught, right? And until you could see the impact and then it becomes you realize it's important and then it becomes a game, right? Then you start
Mhm.
to learn, okay, if I pay this score, this is going to impact my score. If I do this over here, this is going to impact my score. And then you're taking ownership of it and it becomes something that you can control. And once you sort of transition from something that's just sort of impacting you to something that you're taking advantage of, it can really pay some serious positive dividends.
Absolutely. And it all kind of comes back to the same thing that we've talked about. I'm pretty sure every single episode, which is because so few of us were taught these things, we have become unaware of the impact of a lot of, credit being a good example, the impact debt has on your credit or what
Mhm.
have you. Because these things we were supposed to just figure them out, a lot
Right.
of us didn't have any awareness of them. And once we build awareness, very much like our stress responses or any other mental health issue that we're struggling with, once we have awareness of them, then we can deal with it. Then
Yeah.
we can approach it. It can become a game to get your credit score to go up. I remember sitting in a meeting one day and all of our meetings were very, very boring when I was a faculty member. And the woman in front of me was on, Credit Karma. She was,
Hmm.
I was like, dang, she has a good credit score. And I mean, she's just in
Were you
front of me.
looking over her shoulder?
No, she was sitting right in front of me. I couldn't not see it.
Okay.
I think she wanted me to see her
She
very
probably did. She was showing off. She was flexing. She
what?
was flexing
Look
on
at
y'all.
me. I'm almost at 800. And, she was looking around and, it was up for a long time. I don't even know what she was doing on that website, but, I
Flexing.
think she was flexing just totally. But I mean, it is you don't sign up for Credit Karma or whatever website unless you are building awareness around your finances and how it's impacting you. But when we just push it aside and pretend it's not there, it will come out, and it will come out in stress. Your stress will be higher. It will come out in your living situation and your capacity to do the things you want to do in life, which is going to negatively impact your psyche and your mental health. So it's so important to just pay attention and build the awareness. It's the same thing with anything else that, like, all these kids that we work with. I'm like, how do you deal with that? I'm always trying to figure out what their coping skills are. And I'll say, how do you deal with that? That sounds really hard. And they're like, I try not to think about it. I'm
Hmm.
like, oh, how's that working?
Hmm.
It works for a little while. Like, yeah,
Yeah. You
it
know,
works.
I saw something recently and it was a reel, because I was mindlessly scrolling on Instagram one night. And it was a reel with Tyler Perry and he was on Oprah and they were talking about grief. And he was talking about how he was going through grief and his way of coping was to either work it away or
Hmm.
or drink it away.
Yeah,
And he said what he always found was that whenever he was done working or whenever he was done drinking, the grief was there until he addressed it and dealt with it. And
right.
I remember, and I just heard that like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it just sort of stuck with me. Like these things don't go away until we address them, and then the light bulb goes off if you really address it. It's just like me with my presentations and waiting until the last minute and putting it off, and then the light bulb goes off, and then I'm hyper focused, right?
Right.
It's the same thing. Once the light bulb goes off, then hopefully you begin to work in an proactive way versus a reactive way, assuming that you have the knowledge and the information that you need in order to take the right steps, right? Like one of the things that I had mentioned a little while ago and just sort of glossed over it, but was the we had talked about the debt to income ratio. And again, buying a new house, right? So all these things, looking very closely at these things. Your debt to income is really going to be the amount of debt that you have, the amount of debt that you're paying relative to your monthly income. How much are you paying in debt monthly versus how much income you have coming in? And so the creditors are looking at those numbers. And ideally, you want to have that under around 35%. That's another one of those things when we talk about, well, how much debt should I have? Again, 30% on the credit relative to your credit limit on the credit cards, 35% on the debt to income. Those are good parameters that then people can start to use to start the process of taking control. And you mentioned the credit monitoring app. Those apps are fantastic. They're
They are.
really great because not only do they help you keep score, they also just have articles and information and things that you can learn to help you in this process of reducing debt, building credit, understanding and learning how to manage those things and take control. So those are all huge things that people can be using to
I need you to go back though
limit.
and explain something. I'm sorry, I so
Oh,
interrupted.
you, oh, it's all good.
Okay,
Did you want me to
35%. You were talking about the debt to income ratio. Wait, how did you say it again? What
debt
did
to
it?
income ratio?
Debt to income ratio. You were talking about your house should be 35%. And I want to clarify, are you saying that your mortgage payment should be 35% of your monthly income?
No, all of your debt should be 35% or under. Generally, it's a good idea to keep all of your debt that you owe under 35% of your income. So,
Okay, but buying a house,
mhm,
my house is not 35% of my income.
should be less, right?
My mortgage payment is less, but what I owe on the house is,
Oh, I see what you're saying. No,
yeah,
the
yeah.
amount that you're paying on the debt, your monthly
Okay.
payment, your your
That's what I'm trying to.
monthly debt payments. should
Okay.
be under 35%. No, thanks for clarifying that. And so we could clear that up. No, the amount that you're paying each month on your debt should be under 35% of your income.
Gotcha.
So see, we
In total.
see everybody gets to see how the sausage is made, and then we can squeeze it out to get to what it is that we're trying to get to. But yeah, no, I'm glad you clarified that. But
Yeah,
I will say this is one of the things that I love about our conversations because I know very little about, I am not a mental health professional. I know nothing about stress and outside of when I feel it,
right.
but I don't know anything about it professionally. And so being able to kind of talk through these things and kind of learn as we're talking in real time, hopefully is helpful for folks.
I hope so too. And I think I probably say this every episode. I really take away so much knowledge, and I've already revealed my age and the fact that I'm
We're the
still
same
learning.
age, so
Yeah, yeah, sorry, I outed your age. Just the fact that I'm still trying to figure out these financial pieces. And you're teaching these principles to me that some of which I know a little bit about, but most of them I'm like newly discovering in a new way. I mean, I think
yeah.
that's the other piece of it is that as we talk about these topics, it's so difficult to just stay, debt equals stress equals mental, there's no they're very big topics, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And there's so many subtopics. And one of the
Mhm.
things that I've loved so much since the podcast came out is that people that we know have been reaching out to give us suggestions
Yeah.
about other subjects that are really important to them. And I love that so much. And I think,
Yeah. And sharing their personal stories.
yes,
Yeah.
it's so fantastic. And it for me, when we talk about these topics, I think of like 5 to 10 subtopics that we can talk about. Just renting versus buying a house. I think that's a
Hmm.
topic we want to talk about. So
Yeah.
there's so much to dig into here, and I've loved every second of it. So I
Yeah.
appreciate all of your wisdom, Chad.
Well, I agree with you, and that's ditto because I'll tell you, talking through these reactions to stress today and putting a name to freezing versus accelerating, right?
Mhm.
And I know these things when I feel them personally, but not knowing what they are, how to deal with them, having a tool in place to manage. It's kind of like the credit thing. Once you have a tool and a way to overcome it, then you can address it, right? Same thing with how you deal with your stress responses. Like I know that I sit and I do nothing and I stare.
Right.
We had this conversation a few weeks ago, and the next day, I went and like cleared off a whole bunch of items off my to-do list, right? Because part of it was just having some accountability and talking through it and understanding, why am I letting this live in my head for weeks instead of just addressing it and being done? It's still there. It doesn't go away. Just like the debt or just like stress, it doesn't go away until you address it. So you're living it, you're addressing it every day, you're just not doing anything about it. And
Right.
so and that's not said to be disparaging. It's just it's what's happening. And being able to talk through things and but also, we talked about stress, but particularly with debt, and I know this topic has come up too, there's a certain amount of shame that also that also
Right.
makes it difficult to discuss. Particularly in my profession, talking about a personal debt isn't the most exciting thing to talk about.
Right. You
Um,
don't bring it up at the dinner party.
don't really bring it up at the dinner party. But it is one of those things that we deal with personally. And so, being able to talk through these things is it can be a release. It can be helpful. And hopefully it's helpful to other folks to hear us talking about it as well.
I hope so.
Yeah. So I guess we're done.
I think so. I think so. So thanks everyone for joining us as we have uncovered the connections between some of your financial well-being and mental health. Let's remember that achieving financial well-being is not just about numbers, it's about fostering a healthy relationship with money and understanding its impact on our mental and emotional well-being.
So please make sure to join us next week when we will delve into a lot more of these exciting and hopefully helpful topics. Please also remember to like and subscribe. We are now on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and YouTube. So please join us. I see you smiling over there
I know, it's so
as we
exciting.
grow our listeners. Every week we have friends and folks who are reaching out and letting us know that they're listening, and we want to make sure that that we grow our listenership because it's topics that we think are important. So
Absolutely.
until next time, please make sure to take care of your mind and your wallet.
Thanks, y'all.